The snow in Ashwood had always been deep in December, but this year it seemed to bury the town in silence. The trees surrounding the small village were shrouded in frost, their branches gnarled and heavy with ice. Christmas lights, once strung proudly across roofs and windows, hung dim and broken. For 10-year-old Henry, Christmas had once been magical, a season of warm cocoa, laughter, and the glow of a crackling fire. His father used to bring home a pine tree, and together they decorated it with tinsel and candy canes. His mother would bake gingerbread men, the smell filling the house with a sweetness that made him feel safe. But those memories felt like they belonged to another boy, another life. This year, everything had changed. After the factory shut down last winter, his father disappeared one night, taking only his coat and a suitcase. Without him, Henry and his mother were left with nothing. They sold the house in the spring, then moved into a crumbling shack on the edge of the forest. By December, they had run out of firewood, and the cupboard was empty save for a few stale crumbs of bread. Henry sat on the floor of their one-room shelter, wrapped in a thin blanket. His mother lay on the cot, her face pale and hollow, her breath shallow. She hadn't eaten in days, giving what little food they had to him. He wanted to be angry, but there was no strength left in him for anger. "Maybe Santa will find us," Henry whispered to himself, staring at the frost creeping along the single cracked window. He remembered the stories his mother used to tell him about how Santa always brought gifts to good boys and girls. "I've been good, haven't I?" But his voice wavered, doubt gnawing at him like hunger. Outside, the wind howled, shaking the flimsy walls of the shack. Midnight came, and with it, an eerie stillness. Henry couldn't sleep. The silence pressed on his ears, louder than the wind had been. And then, faintly, he heard it. The soft jingling of bells. He sat up, his heart racing. Was it a sleigh? Was it Santa? He crawled to the window, wiping away the frost with trembling fingers. In the darkness beyond the trees, he saw a figure. It stood just at the edge of the woods, tall and unmoving, its silhouette faintly illuminated by the moonlight. The figure wasn't wearing red, nor did it carry a sack of toys. Instead, it was cloaked in tattered black robes that seemed to flutter in a wind Henry couldn't feel. A bony hand emerged from the folds of the cloak and beckoned him. Henry's breath caught in his throat. Every instinct told him to stay inside, to curl up and pretend he hadn't seen it. But something else, a strange pull, like a thread tugging at his chest, drew him toward the door. He slipped on his boots and coat, careful not to wake his mother, and stepped out into the cold. The snow crunched beneath his feet as he approached the figure. Its hood obscured its face, but Henry could feel its gaze, a heavy, icy weight that made him shiver more than the cold ever could. "You seek a gift," the figure said, its voice low and hollow, like the wind whispering through a graveyard. Henry's mouth was dry. He wanted to speak, but no words came out. "I know what you desire," the figure continued. "Food for your table, warmth for your home, joy for your mother." Henry nodded, his heart pounding. Can you help us?" The figure tilted its head. "I can, but all gifts require sacrifice." "What do you mean?" "Follow me." The figure turned and began gliding into the forest, its robes trailing behind like shadows on the snow. Henry hesitated but found his legs moving on their own. The deeper they went into the woods, the darker it became. The trees closed in around them, their twisted branches like skeletal arms reaching for the sky. Eventually, they came to a clearing. At its center stood a massive ancient oak tree, its bark blackened and scarred with strange, glowing runes. Beneath its gnarled roots was a small wooden chest, faintly glowing with a soft, golden light. "This is where your gift lies," the figure said, pointing a crooked finger at the chest. "But remember, no gift comes without a price." Henry approached the chest, his hands trembling. When he lifted the lid, he found a single wrapped present inside. The paper was pristine white, tied with a blood-red ribbon. The glow seemed to pulse as he picked it up. "What's the price?" Henry asked, his voice barely a whisper. The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, it stepped closer, its hooded face leaning down to his level. Henry flinched as he saw what lay beneath the hood. Nothing but darkness, a gaping void where a face should have been. "The price," it said, "is you." Henry stumbled back, clutching the present. "I don't understand." The figure reached out, its skeletal fingers brushing against his chest. A sharp, cold pain shot through him, and he gasped as a silvery mist began to pour from his mouth. It swirled into the figure's hand, a faint, shimmering light. "Your warmth," it said. "Your joy, your laughter. These are the currency of miracles." Henry tried to pull away, but his body was frozen in place. The light from his chest grew dimmer as it flowed into the figure's hand. When it finally let him go, he collapsed into the snow, clutching the present. His body felt heavy, his heart hollow. "You may return now," the figure said, its voice distant as it faded into the shadows. "Your gift awaits." Henry stumbled back through the forest, the present clutched tightly in his hands. When he reached the shack, he opened the door to find a transformation. The room was warm, a fire crackling in a stone hearth that hadn't been there before. The table was laden with food, a feast of ham, roasted potatoes, fresh bread, and steaming soup. In the corner stood a Christmas tree, its branches glittering with lights and ornaments. His mother was sitting at the table, her face alive with color, her eyes bright. "Henry," she cried, running to embrace him. "Look what Santa brought us, a miracle." Henry tried to smile, but the warmth of her hug felt distant, as if there were a wall between them. He glanced at the table, at the food in the tree, and felt nothing. No joy, no relief, only emptiness. That night, as his mother sang Christmas carols by the fire, Henry stared into the flames, his reflection in their flickering light cold and hollow. Somewhere in the woods, beneath the ancient oak, the figure waited, its void-like gaze fixed on the next desperate soul who would come seeking a gift. And Henry knew, deep in his empty heart, that the gift he had received was not his to keep.